took a week off because Tech sadly didn't have sports in Omaha, Nebraska last week or this week, but that's neither here nor there. We are here for Science 173. Jake and Akshay are holed up in Midtown together because there is lightning at Jake's current abode. So we're back. So they're back to their old days of how this used to happen before I joined on. And also in the Zoom call is Ken Sugiura, no longer the Georgia Tech beat writer for the AJC, but sports columnist at the AJC. So new position. Congrats on the new gig, I guess, Ken.
Thank you very much. I'm excited about it. It's been kind of weird not being the tech guy anymore, but I appreciate you guys having me back.
What should, before we get to the article we want to talk to you about,
Yeah.
what should the people that have been reading you for a long time now, what should they expect in terms of your relationship with tech going forward and where they may see you still pop in and out?
Okay, well, I mean, I think my charge, I guess, is writing about sports in Atlanta and the state of Georgia, and so obviously, I know actually I've already received the schedule for the columnist rotation, and I'll be at a few games, and I'll be at the game in MBS and
Nice.
at least a couple more. So I think
Cool.
as tech is. I feel like, there's something interesting to say about this, then I'll be by. But yeah, certainly I'll be in and out, I'm sure.
Cool. Chad
Yeah.
Marshall, for those that don't know, is the new Ken, I guess, going forward. So hopefully we'll have him on the podcast as soon enough. He just had a child, so congrats.
Chad Bishop, by the way.
Chad Bishop, Marshall. Oh, okay, I know what Chad Marshall.
Chad
that was my slip up.
Yeah.
I said Marshall. I know what Chad Marshall. That's where the
Chad Marshall is a well-respected retired central defender for the Seattle Sounders.
All right.
Not
Yes, this is where this. Oh my goodness, my soccer.
I gotta say, Ken,
Chad
you're
Bishop.
welcome back anytime, though.
Thank you.
But yes, no, Chad Bishop he'll get an invite to come on at some point.
Yeah.
So we wanted to bring Ken on because he wrote this really cool article about Brittany Donaldson, who now is working. I'll let you do more of the explaining, but basically she's a big data person in sports right now, and one of the few female data people in sports right now. And the Hawks hired her, and you talked with Nell Fortner extensively about, I guess, the nature of female coaches, female staff members getting into men's basketball versus compared to the relationship of men's coaches and staffers getting into women's basketball. So, explain what inspired the article and what you learned out of it.
Sure. So, so as a columnist, trying to figure out what's going on out there that'd be worth writing about. And obviously, Brittany Donaldson's hire. She is the first female assistant coach in the Hawks franchise history, and maybe I think she'd been at the Raptors and with the Pistons, and last year she's one of the first 15 in league history. And so obviously, a pretty significant moment in Atlanta and Hawks history. And so I thought, it'd be worth writing about her. And so I was trying to figure out, what would be interesting, would be hopefully interesting to write about regarding her. And I mean, the first part is, it's a cool moment. It obviously, for anyone who's interested in equality and people who getting a chance to do something maybe they haven't been previously allowed or able to do, it's cool for that reason. But then as I thought about it more, I was like, well, it's still the case that in college basketball, and probably even high school basketball for that matter, the men's game is very, very much still, and really the NBA is to a large degree also, but certainly much more so in if you look at the NCAA member schools and who's on their benches for men's basketball, it's almost completely all men. And so I thought it'd be Nell Fortner would be someone to talk to because she's someone obviously who's been around college basketball a long time. And I was curious for her perspective. And, I think she was interesting. She and a few other people were optimistic that more women will get a chance to coach on the men's side if that's something they desire in the future, in the near future even. But there's one number. So I think just for the sake of perspective context, I think there's something like, among assistant coaches in Division I and also in NCAA, 30, 35, 34%, the coaches are men, and in the women's game, and on the men's side, I forget what the numbers. It was something like, I know in Division I, there's no women head coaches, and like 1 out of every 222, I think it was.
Yeah, that's what you're.
Coaches
I have it pulled up. Yeah, it was,
are women, and obviously, the point I made was, you can argue if you want, which I wouldn't, men are better suited to coach men, blah, blah, blah. But you can't tell me that, the ratio of qualified candidates, for an assistant coaching job in the men's basketball is 222 to 1. I
Right.
think it's probably a little less than that. So
Yeah.
hopefully in time, those numbers will adjust and more women will get the chance that they deserve. And so that was the thrust of it. That good for the Hawks, good for the NBA, but there's more work to do.
It seemed like you talked to a bunch of interesting folks for it. I noticed. Oh my gosh, what's her name? Georgia State's beach volleyball head coach.
Beth Van Fleet.
Yeah, Van Fleet. Just in addition to obviously a lot of basketball folks. So really a broad perspective. So did appreciate that. And I kind of had a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, might be most worthwhile to ask Dawn Staley this, but I mean, as far as I was aware, it seemed like somebody tried to back up the Brinks truck for her to come over to it was
I remember
college basketball.
I remember
was
this.
it the NBA?
I think it was an NBA job. I'm almost
It was the 76ers, I'm pretty sure.
The Philadelphia connection.
It was like a Bill Simmons tweet situation where he was like, where everyone knew that he didn't actually know what he was talking about.
Okay.
Right. He just threw Don's name. He made the Philadelphia Dawn Staley connection.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it became like a story.
It became a story because
aggregated.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. Dawn makes like $3.5 million working with South Carolina.
Okay.
And no men's program would pay that much.
Well, and the point I was going to with this is like yes, it's great to see like prominent women's coaches in the women's sport, but also like Dawn is great at coaching women's basketball and is an icon in what she does. So I'm kind of interested to hear if it would be if you think it would take a big name like that to break into the D1 or the NBA coach, head coaching ranks, or if it's more of a rise up through the rank situation. I mean, obviously we're all just sitting around a podcast type thing, but I don't know. Do you have any prognostication for kind of how people have been coming up through the system? Obviously, I don't think we've seen it yet in any major sport, basketball or otherwise. So,
that's a good question, and I'm going to apologize in advance for my dogs. I'm not sure what they see outside, but they're very intrigued. So I don't know. I mean, well, actually, for instance, it was interesting. I think the day or two, or the day that I wrote this story, there was a G League coach who. A woman who had been named the coach for the G League team for the Kings, and she was someone. She's actually, and I feel, I think her last name is Harding. I should
Lindsay
know her
Harding.
name, but
Lindsay Harding.
So she was a prominent women's basketball player. She played in the WNBA, but obviously in terms of name recognition on the men's side, I think we could probably say that it wasn't great. Certainly not like Dawn Staley. But she was an assistant, I think, with the Kings or with their team or with the G League team, and through that, ascended to taking the G League job. And so, you look at Becky Hammon, probably the most prominent female coach on the men's side. Her path was more like that than Dawn Staley's would be. So I would guess it would be that way. And I know obviously, like you say, Jake, we're all just talking on a podcast, speculating, without a ton of facts to back it up. But I think as I think about it, I would think it would probably be that, if I had to, guess or predict how this would happen, I think it would probably be someone who becomes an assistant coach and gains the respect of the team that she's around and around the league, and she builds up enough credential on in the NBA or in Division One that people feel that decision makers feel comfortable. Okay, yeah, she would fit, as opposed to someone like Dawn Staley, who obviously there's no need to question her. I mean, all the credentials you want, but would be coming completely fresh into the men's side, and I could see where. Again, the people making those decisions be like, oh, we don't know if she can do it or not. It was interesting. I wrote a story about Becky Hammon, and obviously this is someone who had been with the Spurs and had the backing of Greg Popovich and all these other people, she was still being asked, how do you think you can lead a men's team, and would they respect you and those sorts of things. And so if someone who's already proven herself on the med side is getting those questions, how much more would you have those questions for someone, coming from the WNBA or a women's team in Division One? So that'd be that's how I would see it happening. But obviously, who knows? I mean, if, I could certainly see why someone would want Dawn Staley to coach their NBA team, and that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Becky was, I think, the big example there. A lot of people thought probably should have been considered for the various openings that were available a couple, 3 years ago,
right,
on the NBA front. And I mean, granted, the Aces both have this probably one of the best coaches out there and easily the best female roster in the States right now. So it makes sense why they're winning all the games that they're winning.
I mean, look, the NBA is just contractually obligated to hire from the same pool of 35 guys. Like, that's just what the case is. The NHL is the same.
I was going to say the NFL feels like the same thing too. It's like, oh, Bill O'Brien, here he comes.
But that's the thing, right? It takes one team or one executive to have that sort of
it's a leap of faith.
They've got to take that leap and be courageous in that way as well. Like, they have to be like, okay, this person is just as good as good, if not better, as any other option that we have on the table. And we're now not hiring from the same pool of 35 dudes who are middle-aged and like haven't played an NBA ball in 20 years and still think they know how the league works, right? So it's a tough road to, it's a tough road just to get, because you can have the buy-in of the roster, but then you get to the executive level and especially like those guys, they see risk. They're like very heightened in terms of risk aversion because it's their job on the line if the coach fails or something.
Right.
So it gets, it's tough. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. That doesn't mean someone shouldn't do it.
Yeah. I would wonder, like, now that we're, if it'd be one of those situations, like, I don't remember, this is probably before your time, but like Dean Smith and Bill Guthridge. So Dean Smith, Bill Guthridge was Smith's assistant for years and years, and I think this, I read that as it happened. Like so Smith retired. I think it was like in the middle of summer, and at a point where North Carolina really wasn't in a position to let's go out and hire a coach. So they had to almost had to hire Smith's assistant, and so I'd wonder if it'd be something like that where, if Hammond were still with the Spurs, if Popovich kind of would design, okay, here I'm gonna retire in a way that it's almost impossible for the Spurs to be able to hire someone else, or so I would wonder if it might be something like that, but yeah, I think it's funny. I was talking with Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, and he said something about that. Like, and we were talking more about women getting a chance to coach in Division I schools, and he said, yeah, it kind of almost what he exactly said. He said it'll take someone who was confident, progressive, maybe has a little more, is in a position where he can take a risk to hire, to bring on someone who would be very different from the mold. But it's interesting. Like one thing I thought is that it's almost kind of like a market inefficiency where you've got this, half the pool, half the gender, half the world's population that you're completely ignoring just because, we haven't done this before, or I'll take a lot of heat for it or whatever. But, there got to be plenty of people out there women that can do this job and do it well. So
sure. Yeah.
I mean, that kind of ties into, not necessarily a one-to-one here, but some of the work that Robert Pinion has done on our site in the past, talking about, a lot of the coaches just in all the pools, and this is more tied to football, is, your white guy coaches, like you're ignoring large swaths at that point, far more than 50% of the market when you're only hiring from the same good old boys network.
Yeah. And I mean, all of these are good old boys networks, right? Yeah. Like every coach that hits, and everyone wants to work for them.
Yeah.
They keep bringing their connections on to each and every stop. They're the ones that all the information feeds into and then feeds from, right? So
even a relatively young guy, you're McVay and
Kyle Shanahan,
like,
Sean McVay, like those guys. I mean, yeah, like Mike McDaniel got hired at Miami because of Kyle Shanahan. Sean McVay, it's a similar story, except I can't remember whose tree he's from. But
yeah,
you have to, as
they're all entangled like old European empires at this point. The Belichick tree is the Shanahan tree, is the McCarthy tree. It's all the same now.
Right, and I think part of that is that people think that there's an implicit layer of like competence and trust in competence from a recommendation like that. But part of it is just is laziness, not to look at a pool in its entirety. Right. And the other part of it is bias. Like it's an implicit bias. So I think, like we've been saying, it's going to take an executive that is probably in their first couple of years of putting together a team that is younger, that is more progressive, that is willing to take hits, and then also if it doesn't work out, be willing to do it again, potentially.
And
right?
At a team or an organization where it's like you got to rock the boat somehow, kind of thing.
Yeah. So it again, like I think it's going to be tough, but someone will do it. The person who does it will profit off of it. So
yeah, probably.
I
do want to shift towards Nell specifically because she talked about how there may have been a door for her to go coach in the men's game at some point in her past, but didn't. Then did TV after Auburn did TV, came to Tech. We've rehashed that whole part of her career. What did you learn about her career specifically, just to get this more Georgia Tech focused about?
Sure.
Maybe where she thought her other paths may have gone, or what you kind of maybe just based on how she was talking about that, what kind of how she felt about that part of her career that she maybe could have done but didn't.
Yeah. So as we were talking, I forget if I asked her specifically or she brought it up, but she said that at one point in her career, she thought about, maybe I'd like to coach on the men's side. And I to my regret, I wish I'd asked her like when exactly was it. My sense of it wasn't like it was a couple of years ago. It was, probably towards the start of her career. But she chose against it. And actually, this was the interesting part. As I asked her, I was like, well, do you think part of the reason why you didn't was you looked at the industry and thought there's no way I'll get a chance? And she's like, yeah, that's probably exactly what it was. And so it's not, but then the point I was making in the story was that it's not like, this was some great disservice to basketball, because she's done very, very well. And, it's been the women's, if it were ever to happen, but it's the women's game's gain, and it's the men's game's loss that someone who's obviously is proven a coach as she is, was I wouldn't say denied, but certainly, wasn't made welcome or pursued, I guess, for that matter, to coach on the men's side. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. What if, and obviously things have worked out very well for her, but yeah, you wonder if someone had been smart enough to say, hey, you're doing a really good job with wherever you are. Maybe it was at, Purdue or before then. What do you think about coaching over, and like, actually, so the only anything interesting that she said was that, like, when she was at Purdue and when she was with the Fever, the WNBA team she coached and was GM for, she said that, and actually, like, and then when she was also the Olympic coach, that, coaches on the men's side were always welcoming and helpful. And, she was talking about going up to see Rick Carlisle with the Pistons and bringing tape and going over it. And Rudy Tomjanovich was her colleague on the men's side with the Olympic team in, I guess, 2000, I think it was. And, always nothing but helpful to her, she said. But yeah, you wonder, it'd be interesting to go back and find those guys and say, hey, you were around Dale Fortner. She was clearly a good coach. Did you ever think, well, maybe it'd be worth, asking her about an opening? But yeah, but that was funny. Like, and I'm sure at that time, the idea of it was just for, I was going to say for better or worse, obviously for worse. It was just not a possibility or not thought of as, and
I don't think it was.
I guess the world wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, it wasn't inherently obvious. Like, maybe the Fever's coach is good enough to
right.
be a head coach on a different team or something like that. So No, it's interesting. I mean, that makes me think. I'll wonder how her and David Stoudemire get along this coming season, and if they do
Yeah.
shared learnings and stuff like
Yeah,
that between
right.
the two of them. Because
Yeah.
I
I'm
mean-
sure there's some defensive stuff that Nell can teach just about anybody that's ever coached on a basketball team.
Really?
So.
Yeah.
And I mean, admittedly, from both sides, like between Nell, I mean, heck, Josh Pastner coached the women's team there for a
Just in
minute, for a hot-
trainings.
but you know what I mean? Like he and
Right,
Nell
yeah.
got along, like in terms of like as a team. So I think Jack's question is doubly pointed just because there is that history of, at least as far as they say to the media,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
of being. I mean, they're colleagues. It's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any final words here before we move on? Last sentiments on basketball coaching in general?
I have one just to key on something that is, I guess, near and dear to my heart. You mentioned a lot about how Donaldson's role as an assistant coach is analytics oriented. Is there any more that they said or that Donaldson said or that was revealed about that in particular?
Not. I mean, I actually didn't talk to her, and I haven't talked with any with the Hawks about her. I actually will. Hopefully, I'll have an opportunity sooner or later. But yeah, to answer your question, no, I don't. I mean, I know, like you're saying, her background is very much in analytics, and but at the same time, I think it's a disservice to say she's an analytics person. I think she was a coach on the bench for the Pistons, the Pistons and the Raptors. So there's more to it than that. But obviously, she's bringing that bent, which is it's. I think obviously, anytime you're able to add more elements of understanding the game and finding ways to win, that's obviously going to be help.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2 layers of market inefficiency right there, right? We talked about
Right.
hiring assistant coaches and then also investing in data. And I will admit I haven't entirely done the reading on what the Hawks data department looks like. I know
Your colleagues.
I know the Falcons. I know the Falcons have a pretty stacked roster. I know United is working on that. And I know what other teams are in town. I guess that's the other 2 teams in town.
Braves.
The Braves.
Yeah.
Hey, other 2 teams in town, technically not in town. The Braves,
Fining's finest, yeah.
the Braves have a veritable army of analysts. So it's good to see. I mean, from me in a pet interest standpoint, it's good to see investment and obviously tying it back to this. Like you said, 2 market inefficiencies that they're taking advantage.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah. I will say one more thing. This is kind of I in looking at and preparing for the story and looking at I was trying to figure out, is there someone else besides Nell Fortner that we were talking to? And I noted that their graduate manager on the women's team, Lauren James, and she was in the story. She played at an AI school in Indiana and graduated with the degrees in math and computer science, and had internship.
Is it Rose Holman?
No, it's Taylor University. It's a small school, but and then she had internships with the Pacers and the 49ers, and now is a manager for the women's team. And now she's actually she's getting a degree in a master's in analytics, I think it is. So obviously a really, really smart person. And it was interesting. I was asking her, like, how much are you able to I guess do analytics or whatever. I'm sure there's a better verb for the women's team. And she was saying, there's, as far as like what's widely available, the data is not quite what you'd have in the NBA, and so there's only so many things she can do, I think. But it's kind of cool that she's in this place where obviously a place that values people that can think in that way, and maybe there's a way that she's able to contribute, in her remaining season at Tech. But the other thing is, like, it'll be curious to see kind of what, if she's able to follow a path like Brittany Donaldson or whomever else, now that, a more, there's more of a place for women, marginally so, but also B, like you're saying, actually, there's, analytics is becoming more and more embraced. So we'll see. She may be the most. I mean, maybe she'll be running a team in 20 years, and we'll say, "Gosh, remember when?" But yeah. So yeah, it was. I'm glad I was able to talk with her.
That's really cool. thanks for writing that. That was just fun for us to think about as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Before you leave, let's shift over to golf because I know you paid
Mhm.
attention somewhat to the big old golf stuff that happened with Tech and them getting darn so close to winning a title and
Yeah.
Steelman getting darn so close to winning a title.
Mhm.
So maybe the sad part about Steelman bogeying his last 3 holes in the individual title was him losing his Masters spot.
Right.
But
Yeah.
now Crystal Lamprecht,
Huh?
now RNA amateur champion status, has earned himself an invite to the Masters next year. He won they basically effectively won the British Amateur. And so
Right.
he's in there. He also did really good at the Arnold. I think he played the Arnold Palmer Cup too. So he's
Oh, that's right.
So he's had a couple
Yeah, that was
big time stuff recently, and kind of Connor Howe and a couple of other guys are playing in other smaller tours nationwide. So big stuff for Christo. Will have at least one yellow jacket in Augusta. There's usually 2 or 3, 4, depending on how the years go down.
Right.
But just in general, what did you take in from the end of the golf season of what you kept track of? Did you talk to any of them at the end or anything like that?
Well, to answer that question, the answer is no. I guess I had a little bit moved on, and also I was on vacation, so
That's true.
I'll use those as excuses. But certainly, yeah. I mean, anyone who knows Bruce Hepler just knows what a good guy he is, and certainly his record at Tech speaks for itself. They're almost always in the they're almost always in the NCAA tournament or the NCAA championships. They won a ton of ACC tournaments or championships, I guess they're called, or maybe they're tournaments. But regardless, yeah, always in the top 10. Just all Americans left and right. And I think what's I'm not telling you guys anything new, but particularly when you compare what he's done with any other team at Tech in that time, it's amazing. And if it'd be incredible if it was a Stanford or at UCLA or wherever. But I think all the more so at Tech where there, as you guys hear and you guys know, there's challenges and obstacles, and he's found a way to kind of to make it work, and they've really got it rolling. And so, but the one thing, unfortunately, that he has yet to accomplish, or Tech has yet to accomplish on his watch, is to win a national championship. So yeah, I was actually I was actually I was in Japan, so but I was still very kind of curious, as Tech was making its march into the through match play, like, man, could they do it this year? And you loved it for Tech and for Bruce in particular for that to happen, but obviously they ran into a very good team and fell short. So it's obviously finishing second in the country in anything is great, and so it's you don't want to limit or discount what happened, because it's a team that they didn't really pull it together until the very, I think tell me if they didn't win a tournament
Jake
until the ACC tournament. Yeah.
And
yeah.
ACC tournament.
Right. Yeah. And then they went to the regional and were dominant there and played really well, obviously, at NCAA. So another really, really good season for the Tech golf team. But regarding Christo, I wrote something about him right around I guess as they were going to NCAAs, I think. And I was writing a story about him and just how he was really turning his play on, and he was saying how, and Bruce was saying how, really last fall even his results were kind of up and down, and it was clear he had the talent. He hits like 320 off the tee and had the ability to be much better, but was having top 10 one week and 50th the next. And what I think Bruce and Devin Stan, the assistant coach, were telling him was like, listen, it was, he wasn't, it's often he just wasn't pressing enough, that he was, when things were going well, he's like, okay, I've got it figured out, and they didn't see him quite as much at the practice range, and then when he was struggling, he would kind of maybe go in too hard and kind of skew things that way. But so at that point, over the winter break and going forward, I think he was much more consistent in how he was working on his game, and the results followed. And so the last thing I'll say about this is actually with that the Masters this past April, and I believe Larry Mize, the 82, 83, 80.
No, 86 is Jack. That's
84.
Jack, I think.
I'm sorry, but and a Master champion in the 80s. Obviously that incredible chip to beat Greg Norman. And he was the only former Tech player at the Masters last year, and he announced that he was not going to continue playing competitively at the Masters. He's in his 60s, and just the amount he's playing and the length of the course where it was to the point where he just couldn't. He probably didn't feel like he could really compete in a way that he wanted to. Yeah. And so after his last round, I asked him, we need, how are you gonna get some more Tech guys here? And because I think Stuart Sink, I think his exemption through winning the British is out.
That's out at this point.
Yeah. And I think actually Kuchar was close to qualifying through whatever is world golf ranking or FedEx points or something, but he just missed.
Oh, okay.
And there's no one else that is obviously clearly to the point where he's a lock to make it next year. And so it very much appeared like you could go next year without having anyone from Tech in it. And so now Christo Lampic to the rescue, and the streak will continue. Yeah,
we got one.
And so, maybe Kuchar and someone else will join him. But
Kuchar feels like at any point in the next 6-7 years he can still find his way in, something like that. And I mean, the rest of this past year's team for Tech is you never know when one of them can make it past the Corn Ferry, past PGA Canada, and be like, nope, okay, we're here now, and they go get T30th in the tournament and get some real points.
Jack, this is something that's I think probably dates from the first year we did this podcast. But I mean, on any given day, any one of these golf teams that we've seen put together since I got to Tech, which was too long ago now. But I saw you roll your eyes, Akshay. Anyways,
don't tell that to Larry Mize.
On any given day, it seems like they could be the best in the country.
Yep.
Related hot take: the 2020 team probably was even better than this one, but never got to prove it because of COVID.
They would have destroyed an
NCAA. Ogletree, Stefracci. Oh my goodness, it would have been.
Yeah.
I think about that more than I care to admit.
Oh my god, they would have destroyed an NCAA tournament field. They were.
All that to say, I think we saw that in this team this year, right? It was when they played that regional, that was the best postseason round of golf they've ever had, and this is a decorated team. This is a team that's tied for the most ACC titles of all time with Wake Forest, who had 30 years of racking those up before we got in the conference to do that. So just wild. And especially contrasting Christo's, I'd say pretty incredible hot streak since the season for the NCAA ended with, they're a couple strokes one way or the other for him or for someone else. And that's a title. And I don't know. Hepler's still bringing in the hardware, and his boys are consistently great. So it does hurt not to see him get over. And I know this is a point you made a while back, but I did want to say it. He's an accomplished coach no matter what. But man, it just seems like that's the thing, right? He's had Christo win the amateur. He's had Strafacci and Ogletree in the U.S. That's you can't. What, dozens of ACC titles?
The record speaks for itself.
Yeah,
I think this is where we kind of leave it. The record speaks for itself.
Thank you, Akshay.
Well, I didn't. He was going to go over the entire medal case, so I got to give him I got to give his voice a rest. But
a lot longer than Virginia Tech's.
Great,
still empty. But But I think the overarching point is it just sucks, right? It sucks to see them. It still sucks to see them get so close to the precipice, and you said, it's a couple strokes here and there.
Sucks. Yeah, not a boo.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. No,
that's clarifying, Jake.
Let the dead be dead, Akshay.
Oh my god.
His dead may never die. I think that's all the talk we have for golf.
Oh god.
Jack, do you have anything else?
I think we're good there. We got Christo and the Masters. We'll all have a guy to collectively root for with no previous golf entanglements in the current saga of the golf world. So that's nice.
We did mention Greg Norman. That was a good moment because the only thing that I could think about was Larry Mize defeating Liv's champion Greg Norman.
Yes. No, that's all we got. No, Ken, thanks so much for hopping on and chatting with us on another one of the summer nights before. I don't know. We probably won't even be recording next week. Who knows the week after that? So glad we got some time with you before. Who knows what the hell happens next with tech? So
right. Yeah, my pleasure, and always fun to talk with you guys. It's funny. I always feel like my knowledge of, if nothing else, my knowledge of like tech's more prominent non-revenue teams is pretty good. But then I come on with you guys, and you guys still know more than I do. So kudos to you.
I get him. Jake. I think I know a lot, and then I have to sit in the room with Jake, and it's like, oh dear God.
Virtual room.
I gotta tell you.
I'm the one that's sitting in the actual room.
Yeah,
I gotta tell you. I just finished digitizing all 16,000 Georgia Tech.
Yeah, you see what I'm dealing with here?
All right.
You see what I'm dealing with here?
Get him off the mic.
So you know how the 1952 tennis team did or something.
Oh dear God!
All right, I can run it all for you.
This might require an in-person tutorial, or I don't know what. We'll see. All right.
Yeah, there's a website and everything. It's a whole mess.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I'm trying to make it public.
We're getting him to learn programming by hook or by crook. When we get him to learn how to be a software engineer.
Oh man,
it's not translate to the working world. Sorry, got tech. But...
My goodness. All right. Well, Ken, thanks for your time.
Okay.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I need Jake to give Jake a second before he can do his ad read. So have a good evening.
All right, thanks you guys.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna do the ad read because we're rolling on with this. I think the biggest news for our favorite podcast business, Section 103 has a clearance section now. I don't know if you gents saw that, but that means you can get Section 103 for a great price. I saw some ATL logo stuff there. The football over Atlanta, Georgia Tech. Go check it out. Because the thing about clearance, and I did see this in a tweet, so I feel comfortable saying it, means I think that there might be new stuff coming in, which is just as exciting. Not only can you get great products at a great price, including t-shirts, sweatshirts, a whole variety. A welcome to Atlanta Skyline shirt. Yeah, get them while they're there. Hopefully that means we see some great stuff coming soon too, because you can get a great price here, and this is good stuff. I wear Section 103. No, not more than I care to admit. I will loudly admit that I wear it all the time.
He's not wearing it right now.
I have not been home since church, and that was at like 9 this morning, so it's been a long day. But that being said, yes, go check them out. Go check them out on clearance and section103.com and at section 103 on Twitter, as not just this, but new things hopefully are in the pipeline, as well as always for shipping on orders over $70. Gents, back to you.
All right, I will take back over the con for our, I guess this is the Ides of the Summer episode. Let's talk about the newest campus plan, the newest iteration of the campus plan called the Comprehensive Campus Plan. There's a couple of different aspects to this, but it's been gestating for a couple of years after the introduction of Angel Cabrera as Institute president. A couple of the factors here, we're looking at a bunch of strategic initiatives, a historic preservation plan, instructional space planning, landscape, stormwater, student athletic performance. There are a lot of pieces, so I'm just going to roll through these. Bobby Dodd, housing, the Midtown connector cap, which I'm sure we've talked a lot about before.
Put a soccer stadium on it. Wait, what?
Parking and transportation, PTS. There's a plan for that. Seriously, anything that you can think of in relationship to Georgia Tech, there is a
the Greek center plan, the Greek sector plan. Akshay,
I said anything. I said anything. But there are a couple points that we wanted to touch on specifically as part of this, because no one has the time to go. Well, Jake has the time to go watch the 1 hour town hall.
I watched this after sitting through this being presented to me live, so I've really seen this twice.
Okay, actually, let's start there. I think this is a good place. So you had an opportunity to get to walk through this presentation.
Yes.
What was the timeline? The timeline for this, like the developing this plan.
Let's also clarify who was giving this presentation and so who
Also
it was getting
that.
presented to.
So
Yeah,
every
it was-
podcast is someone's first.
It was the architectures and consultants that do this. So my involvement in school was with the strategic plan. That was like one of the first plans from this new administration. And that was high level, right? Pillars and thoughts and philosophies and things. And then you saw things like branding, and now you're seeing comprehensive campus plan. Think of it as a master plan. They used to call it the master plan in the previous update, but now I guess it's so many plans rolled into one. And
I would also hope that you don't use the acronym for this one.
Whatever the difference is between a climate action toolkit and a climate action plan, we got those. We've got really any sub plan, but that's how you do it, right? It's one thing to have a really broad master plan, but then not attack specific components, right? And it's breaking up into manageable chunks. I know for us, one thing that I didn't see on our extensive list is there was a decent chunk of conversation, at least with the young alumni group, about like campus transit. And there's some people like,
it shows up on here.
But cars and things, and people are talking about like things like that, and really anything that you could think could be a part of this is right, and whether that's internal programming or just what's in the spaces, let alone the spaces themselves. Because a lot of times you might think of a master plan and just think of it as, boom, here's what we're building, and it's not really that either, right? It's not locking specific parts into specific parcels and specific uses into specific rooms. It's thinking about needs and thinking about what that long-term build out of Tech's campus looks like, and it's something that, even though the most recent master plan wasn't all that long ago, in terms of focus, in terms of how Tech is trying to be connected into neighborhoods, I mean, Science Square wasn't really a glimmer in anyone's eyes, even 4 or 5 years ago.
No.
Let alone, how we kind of see it literally rising above the west side, and things like this change. So it's something that does come up, and I think at least in the live one, a lot of it was just trying to get people familiar with what this all entailed, right? Like, because a lot of people don't think about planning in a day-to-day thing if it doesn't cross their lives.
I think one of the things that you mentioned there, that we're not actually allocating specific parcels for specific reasons, is actually really important, because you also have to remember in all this, Georgia Tech is in it's painted itself into a corner, right? They have
physically, in terms of space, yeah.
They have that one extension over into the west side, but for the most part, they're stuck in the parcel that they have. They have to make do with the space that they have, and there's no real way to expand the campus anymore. Not like there was in the 50s and 60s. No. Well, certainly not even like there was in the 2000s.
Well, even in the 50s and 60s, that required paving over a giant part of Home Park. So,
look,
it's like, Jack, I don't know if you know this. The Couch building where the band practices.
Yep.
That was the elementary school, or the primary.
I may have heard that before.
For the neighborhood that is now West Campus.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
in the same way that O'Keefe
was the middle school. Yep.
Or Midtown, when Midtown was a residential neighborhood, right? Yeah. Like, it's not like Tech was like, oh, we've got all this land.
Urban renewal. They took,
like, Tech Parkway is literally a very famous example of urban renewal.
They took fervent advantage of
a podcast on this at some point.
No, we wrote
we did write a piece.
We wrote a whole thing about it. Engineering a program. Go check it out. But they are stuck for the most part within the footprint. The Science Square is an expansion opportunity, but the idea with all of these squares, and I don't know if this touches on it, is that it's circle in a way, because they're all partnerships, right? They're all partners. They're public-private partnerships.
So it's that's the ATDC model.
Yeah, and it worked with ATDC. It's worked with Tech Square, right? They have a lot of people investing in Synergy.
Well, and that's what the ATDC and Synergy model was. And if people out there haven't read Wayne Clough's memoirs, that came out fall 21, I want to say, that's a great place to start, because what's driving the thoughts in Midtown of the development of Scheller and of Barnes and Noble and of Tech Hotel and of ATDC and Synergy is exactly what's happening now on the west side in a very similar pattern.
I mean, yeah, and Midtown back then used to be just until pretty recently, it used to be just a bunch of not warehouses, but like chop shops and small,
Mhm.
like residential to a certain extent, but like very like
The
I
part that
I don't know how
the
to
part
say
that's
very
been
nice things about it.
redeveloped doesn't look like what the stuff on the east side of Piedmont looks like.
Yeah.
Is what
right,
you're saying.
right. That makes a lot of sense.
And one thing I want to like circle back here in terms of the spots and squares, these priorities are going to change, right? Coda building, Science Square, these are not things that were in the previous master plan, at least not explicitly. Maybe Coda just in the general, like maybe we redevelop Tech Square, but like it really wasn't in terms of stuff that's been publicly released. Like it's not something that just straight up went out there. And I think where it's important and a good thing for us to kind of use as a perfect example of this is there's plenty of old master plans where what is now Mewborn was more Greek housing and parking and things like that. And softball was slated to go, if you will, over closer to Marietta, which to tie this into kind of, I think where we find it most relevant to Scions of the Southland is where they're currently talking, at least in there's two plans that they presented them, like moderate growth and the aggressive growth. And in the more aggressive one, they're talking about putting a varsity size soccer field, honestly, kind of in the same exact spot where softball was slated to go years and years ago.
Yeah.
Well, let's get there, right? Let's talk about one of the major pillars of this plan, which is talking about space drivers and needs. Some of the things that have been mentioned in the presentation, talking about enrollment growth and how that drives space needs.
And we're already at deficits for some things, even with the enrollment growth.
Oh my God, we were at deficits when we were in school, and that was not that long ago.
Yeah. Green space being chief among that.
Green space. One of the things that we have listed here is recreation. It's not just
weight rooms are a big thing.
It's not just the actual athletic facilities, right? We mentioned the soccer field, but
there's 4 public squat racks for 30,000 kids.
Yeah.
Like that was a big
It's
deal.
up to 10 now, actually.
Oh,
but I think one of the things, if I could,
but they'll only have to wait a half an hour instead of an hour.
I think one of the things here that was good, at least while I was in school, is that they built the tech connector in between 2 of the freshman dorms, and that gives students like an extra space, right? We'll talk about more connecting rooms later on, but that gives students an extra space to do that. That's not a mile away on the other side of campus. So I think they're addressing it, but it's obviously very slow. That's going to have to be a priority moving forward.
And a lot of these other priorities they were mentioning was like that tech is intentionally growing their student base, like the number of people they want in Midtown on campus. They want that number to grow. I've talked to Rick Clark about this. We mentioned this on an episode I did with him about a month and a half ago. They got some 4,000 people coming in. And their goal was somewhere around 4K, and they want to make that a larger number in terms of that's just undergrad. That's not even transfer, or graduates. So like that's already a larger number that to 4K 4,000 times 4.5. You're talking about 20,000 just undergrads on campus, and they want that number to be bigger. And we don't have the space
even
right
at
now.
75% of that, when I was a freshman, that they were running out of places to put freshmen, right? North Ave is traditionally upperclassmen housing, but it's having to be used for more and more freshman housing as more and more kids are coming in, and also after Woody's was taken offline.
Woody's isn't taken offline.
The housing part wasn't taken offline?
I don't think so.
It's gonna get taken off if it hasn't already.
There were kids living it that I knew from swim club when I was a grad student.
Okay, check that part. But
just the dining hall was taken offline, and they're building. They did announce a new building going next to it. Finally, right? That's the first on-campus.
First on-campus dorm construction, and depends on how you count renovations.
Building, first on-campus new building is
since they bought North Ave apartments.
In ages,
and even before that.
And what they need to do, if you're calling Jake, is blow out 8th Street to go all the way out to North Side, so that way you can come and go that way too. But we got to call GDOT for that one, and that's a whole other podcast.
Whole other podcast that probably will get us canceled on Twitter.
BRT in 2054 or whatever,
But a couple of the other notes that came out of this in terms of more athletic specific things. Esports arena was one of the things that was mentioned, which I found really interesting, especially considering Tech's actually surprisingly.
Very competitive. Very competitive.
This is surprising for Tech, but very healthy esports competitive culture.
Yes. No, I think it's kind of a shame we don't have we have events, but it feels like we should be having major events. I've talked to some people who work with GTRI and other places that have thought about how to best do this. There isn't a great space for it. ideally you would use
Turner
McCamish.
hosts
Ideally,
sometimes
what do you think?
across the
Ideally,
street.
you would use McCamish, but here's the problem: there's no loading dock at McCamish, so
Nope,
you can't
that's why you
truck
don't
in.
get wreck ride outs.
So you can't truck in
Oh,
all
well,
the
it's
various.
also-
I mean, you can't
I
truck
think
in
that's-
anything basically. Like if you want to bring a lot of equipment in, you have to literally take it through the
Can't get it down to
doors
that level.
at the
Mhm.
top
Yeah, 'cause
and
you can't get
stair
it down
down.
to court level.
No, you have to take stairs and build it. You have to build infrastructure just to get things inside the building. So it's incredibly infeasible to do. I think like a really good LAN tournament that that Tech would kill at hosting.
LAN
And we
party.
can't.
I will
Do it in O'Keefe.
Tech,
Do it in O'Keefe.
the LAN parties that Tech could host
no air conditioning.
is insane. They're getting better on the air conditioning there, but
Point
yeah,
stands.
but yeah,
Roof renovation done yet.
they added. But I think here's the note here: is they're adding. They mentioned esports in the same breath as they did all the other recreational needs that they know students are going to have to get to add the green spaces. Because SAC Fields is only so good and used all the time by non-tech entities. The Burger Bowl is unusable half the year because it's either too dry or too wet.
And that's the thing too about the SAC fields is I love being a thing that the community can use, but if the tech community can't use it and they need this space, then like, sorry, rec league soccer guys, but you know, like like Club Ultimate Frisbee needs that space.
Yeah,
Buy it.
I'll note that a lot of these green spaces they were thinking about, where they're going to be ideally positioned is like behind Z-Bar, back on that west side of campus, where there's that new building that's probably gonna go up, all behind the CRC.
Where we
and stuff
wanted
like
to
that.
put the soccer stadium.
No.
That's
more you're talking about closer to the Marietta Artery.
Yeah, I guess. And then the other spot was along North Ave because basically Coke and Tech own all of the property from Techwood Drive on North Ave all the way up to Northside Drive. And that includes the Randall Brothers property, which there's a lot of talk about what will happen there. And so ideally, you put some people there. You add density. Art Square is going to go there. And then you can put some more green space there too, because you got all the space in the world.
And the thing is too, there's already a deck along North Side or on North Avenue there, along with Coke's facilities there. They have a big chunk of surface parking where the Burge Apartments used to be, where there has to be some sort of usable, activatable space.
Oh, is it just that green space that is a football parking lot?
No. That's Roosevelt Apartments that you're thinking of. That was Kablamo. Burge was Tech building. But basically, where I'm going with this, one thing that they say a lot in this presentation is like Tech lacks, and they correctly noted that Tech lacks a college town type area.
Yeah.
And they have all this land with disgusting use along the parking lots I just mentioned on North Avenue, the grassy field you mentioned on North Avenue, but also like where HR and the post sorting building like all those just like kind of bleak looking buildings.
There's a lot of potential for those
Soviet
spots.
architecture.
Yeah. Big brick with no windows, you know. There's a lot of spaces that can be activated, repurposed, reused into a way to do placemaking, which Tech in the core has done a phenomenal job of. I mean, I think we, based on our various years that we became associated with Tech, we failed to realize that like very recently outside of Van Leer was just like parking lot and streets.
Yeah.
And like that Atlantic went all the way up to 10th and it was just a road.
You can see it on Google Earth. It was 2007. That was not that long ago.
The Coke was a parking like
in 2007, also a parking lot.
Yeah.
So there's an
that's the
opportunity.
power of master planning this kind of stuff though, right? Like Eco Commons has been a drawn out process, but it's something that they've done piece by piece as renovations have come up. You know, getting rid of the old nuclear reactor site, putting in parking decks so they can take out parking spots. And, you know, maybe we try and find ways to encourage other mode shift, but it's Atlanta. So we need a lot of help with that. That's not something Tech can do on its own. But when you scoop all that land together, put it in a parking deck, and maybe have some uses there, like the research that they put on the front of the Downey Street deck or the one in Tech Square by the hotel. You know how there's like the cladding, there's like offices on the side, but the hotel deck is behind it. You know, stuff like that where it's
activatable space.
You're activated, and people are coming and going, and bam, now you have this Eco Commons because it's not, you know, a bunch of acres of crumbly asphalt.
Yes.
That holds a bunch of police cars behind
and the wreck trailer.
Yeah, it wasn't. I want to be specific though. We mentioned, like we brought up the soccer field idea. they mentioned in the presentation, which this is public to like watch, like, and anyone
Yeah.
can go find this. This is not secret information that we're talking about here.
And this is why we held off on doing this till after I found a public one of these, because I was like, we should probably make sure that it's something.
This
that
is you can find this. It's on their strategy, their long-term plan page. But one of the slides does include a sketch of where a NCAA regulation soccer field would go. They put it in right behind the CRC, like across from Tech Parkway.
Tech Parkway, Marietta Artery.
Right behind it, there are buildings that exist there right now. So that's the thing they would have to be able to get on. They did not say in any way,
like
shape,
the Wells Fargo.
No.
further north.
CRC.
Where the flyover ramp is from north side.
Oh
Yeah,
that's gonna be a project, huh?
No, but south of there, it's not like on top of the flyover.
So I'll be to be very specific. They in no way, shape, or form said that it was definite. It was just a sketch. It wasn't even a confirmation of that there would even be.
Nothing is.
And added a team or anything like that. It was just like that. We just know this probably is a thing we should think about. So they just put that there as a for example more than anything, and to also demonstrate that you can fit various sized fields along there. So to give it just a demonstration of what was feasible with the property at the time.
Yep.
Just to sort of round out some of these other space drivers, we talked a lot about just growth, like student life and athletics growth needs, I think, or growth drivers. Along with that, we mentioned connection spaces earlier, like the tech connector in the middle of Glennon Towers. There was also an opportunity to build some more resources, like there was a mention of a teaching kitchen, building specifically for the counseling center. Right, that's become that
will easily be one of the most important buildings on campus as soon as
they
built.
They acknowledged the Peters Park dilemma of how that land was bequeathed for active space, and we got cute in whenever we built Peters Park, you could put basketball courts on top. It's like, well, that's not really how that works.
No. Yeah, and the tennis courts are pretty bad there too, so not even flat.
Those are going to need to be repaved.
Yeah, they mentioned that too.
There was some mention also just of the ecology and stormwater collection. I'm not a super expert on the topography of Atlanta and Georgia Tech in particular, but that tying into how Tech eventually is planning to be more climate friendly and more carbon neutral. We saw that with the Eco Commons, right? Being able to basically be, what was it? It was carbon positive, right?
Between Candida and Eco College, it's
carbon positive.
Yeah.
Right. So opportunities like that. I think going along with that, you mentioned mobility, right? Putting more things underneath these parking decks that are just taking up space, and offering more opportunities for mobility. I think one of the big quotes, or one of the big ideas that was mentioned from the presentation, is that a lot of trips on campus, I think the number, or the phrasing is, most trips on campus don't occur where current transit options go.
Correct.
Right. Your Stinger buses don't
go. If you watch it, they have a really cool map, and like the bus routes are just along first. They make the circle around campus and go to Tech Square. The biggest routes are cut right through Tech Green, just wherever the walkways are. It's the walkways. It's all the walkways. It's not the roads.
Right.
Well, that's where the Tech Square Express was such a game-changing concept or idea. Is like, oh, we're taking people from the center of campus to Tech Square, which is what they actually want to do, rather than fight their way to a blue route and get to the corner and not even get all the way to Tech Square.
I think this is another opportunity to be multimodal, right? I think one of the major failures with the scooter thing is that they were everywhere. Right. They were not in designated locations like Atlanta. I mean, this was also,
you never knew where you could find them.
You never knew where you could find them. And they were also just strewn across, right? They were everywhere. This is an opportunity to say, okay, we will still do scooters, but we're going to have them in these designated locations, in these parking decks. And now you can get out of your car if you're a commuter student or a faculty member, or something like, maybe a faculty member is not going to take a scooter.
And they mentioned that for the faculty especially, like the majority of them still prefer to come to campus by car.
And a lot of them live in burbs where they have to.
And they have to, But then when they get here, they're like, no, we don't want to have to drive on campus, which makes perfect sense. Everything's close enough. You shouldn't need to drive and add extra.
No one should ever want to drive on
exactly. So
it's terrible.
Basically, and they had this. Basically, the idea also is that they're not going to add any new parking. Like, one of the definite parts of this plan is there will be no net new parking. But the idea of using the decks as like a pivot point for other kinds of transportation on campus outside of your feet, if you want something else.
Well, and one thing there too that they actually acknowledged, which I thought was like, wow, about time, was the fact that North Avenue MARTA station exists too. And if you think about this is my go-to example for this. The 36 bus route is at one end, starts at Midtown and goes to Decatur Station. The amount of people who will take that end to end are probably very few, right? If you're in Midtown and you're trying to get to Decatur Station, you're probably going to take MARTA to MARTA or whatever. But what it does allow is at both ends, there's a center of gravity, right? And whether that's Tech Square Express going from Scheller to the Kolk and back. But if you're talking about getting people from off campus, if you're going North Ave, boom, right to the Student Center, CRC, Biotech, Midtown, or Scheller Midtown, suddenly you've tied together nodes along the whole thing, making it a more effective system. And they've talked about that with bikes too. And I think this is not even a master plan. I think this is like already going ahead, is the eventual First Ave cycle track, where they're just trying to make it so, you can go all the way from the Path Parkway at Lucky Street at Tech Parkway and boom to Midtown, right? You're creating a network. And that network effect is something that you see, whether it's walking, biking, heck, it works for cars too. If you make it easier to drive and there's more places where people can effectively and safely do that, they're going to do that. It's how people make choices, right?
If I can make one joke in your very serious statement, what do you think happens first? The Beltline or the East Side Beltline extension, or not the Beltline, streetcar extension, the East Side streetcar extension, or Campus Light Rail?
East Side Beltline extension.
You're not playing along with my joke.
It's in like final design.
It is
Campus Light Rail.
The Beltline's happening. That's it. That's happening.
A good joke.
I would love to see camp. There's just places that need it in the city more. And this is where I put on my tinfoil hat and say, if you just built like little sky train type or plane train type things coming off of all the MARTA stops, like 2 stops, woo, you cover so much.
That's such a Chicago thing of you to say.
The ski lift up Freshman Hill needs to happen.
Exactly.
It needs to happen.
No. They get nothing. They walk. They walk. They build up the cash.
I was West Campus. I didn't have to suffer.
West Campus too. Woo.
Both of you can shove it. A couple of other things that were named as aspirational in terms of space drivers and aspirational needs. Startup incubation space. I think we've seen that with ATDC and how that much. I mean, we can make faces about it. I just watched you make one, but like, I think part of Georgia Tech's success, especially on the Tech Square side, has been investing in startups and startup culture and developing that with the rest of Atlanta. So there is that's a possible investment that they can continue to make. A couple other things that would be more community focused, the Community Gateway Center. I'm not entirely sure all of what that would entail, but again, more outreach.
They didn't give any details.
More connecting with the city of Atlanta is always going to be welcome to me. A student welcome center, which I want to come back to in a minute.
That was in the new student.
Again, I want to come back to that.
I'm not too sure about that.
The affinity group housing, I think we've seen pretty successsul experiments with some of the freshman not leadership organization, but like the organization housing
LLCs.
That I forgot what the acronym was. Non-first year student housing, so continuing to like renovate North Ave or invest in other spaces like GLC, right? More campus police facilities, more multi-use spaces, more tech connector style spaces, and gender neutral bathrooms. So that's kind of what they're looking at in terms of what drives space. Renovations is a good point, and I'll come back. I promise this will tie back to the Welcome Center thing. We talked the paper museum building, the paper choice center. I don't know what's in there anymore.
It's a paper museum.
It's just a museum now.
No, there's like
they have some classes there. There's some book binding, like old book preserving things that happen there as well.
I took a paper making class there for one of my English 1102 lectures. That was interesting.
But these are the buildings that are slated for renovation. So Paper Museum, Cherry Emerson, Guggenheim. So aerospace will finally get a renovated building for the first time.
And Cherry Emerson is like active right now too. Like that's been going on for a while.
Oh yeah, there's been fences up
a long time.
Skiles might finally cease to be hurricane proof. Van Leer, parts of its insides have already been renovated. So this is adding to that as well. Bunger Henry architecture, which is
that's an interesting space.
There's some irony in doing a renovation for an architecture school building. Couch, which we've discussed earlier, and the Sustainable Thermal Systems Lab, which actually I'm not.
I don't know where that is, honestly.
It was on the list. I just wrote it down. I
assume
that's what Google. That's what Google Maps. This is a building on the other side of North Ave. This is just what the map said.
It's in the Nara Tep.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. But I want to come back to the Student Welcome Center thing as part of the campus center renovation, because one of the things that when the renovations or the discussions to build the rec garage were going on is the idea of the campus center was, we're going to start
doing tours here.
One of the major ideas was, the rec would be in this display case in the central part of the campus center, which it didn't end up, but not to the point. And we would start tours from this massive welcome center in the middle of campus instead of them starting from the Bill Moore Student Success Center out by the stadium. It's interesting to see that mentioned here. Well, know that those facts, and then see this mentioned here as an aside in the actual.
So here's my thought here is that they run the tours out of there, but they start the tours just in the theater in there. There's not like a dedicated, hey, you've never been to Tech before. Here's like an info station, like a welcome center when you cross a state line, like when you go to Florida, you have the orange juice station,
There's
basically
white and gold and like.
We don't like have a space for the student center doesn't have that. There, like there is the general info desk, but there isn't a hey, you're touring campus kind of like brochure table.
That got cut.
That's my thing. I wonder if it got cut. So that's what I think. That's what
somebody who saw old versions of those.
Yeah,
it was in old discussions.
It had to have gotten cut.
No. Because I remember because there was like the wreck in a glass case,
and they showed us like Northwestern's like
that's the thing I was thinking of, because they showed us that picture, and then they were like, okay, here's the wreck in a glass case. The tour guide facility is right next to it. They're starting tours right in front of the wreck. They're talking about the history of the wreck, and then they'll walk back out to the rest of the campus already in the middle.
They do that in the sense that the tours technically are starting in the the room adjacent to it if you include the student center, but it's not. There isn't a specific touring pit stop area in any of the buildings on campus right now.
I think investing in that is going to be. I think we sort of stated it right. I mean, the entire conceit of some of our podcast episodes is, and an entire conceit of the series is introducing people to tech and showing how cool it is. We talked about the emerging recommendations for renovations, a couple of other big ideas, and I think we've touched on these, but I just want to make sure we enumerate them. And continuing to invest in the core, like that main part of campus around Tech Green. Making sure that we connect back to the southwestern parts of the city. We have Science Square. We want to build a bridge over I think it's Tech Parkway and North Ave.
Well, not just that, you have got that big gash with the railroad tracks and all these buildings that effectively form kind of a wall, yes, to the train tracks, but just even to Marietta. Campus is basically like Tech Parkway is kind of here be dragons, kind of.
Yeah, and I think this is something that's come up in a couple of other different mediums too, right? We've talked about tech, and we said this before. Tech is sort of walled off in the amount of space it can actually expand to. It's never going to have that college town feel because it doesn't have infinite space to gobble up.
No, that's
right. It's stuck for the most part. It's stuck within its four walls.
I would argue that the college town feel is a thing of density and not having space. But if you look what Clemson has done in the last 30 years of their building, it's just whoosh, way out the wall. Or I feel like Auburn's done something similar, right, Jack? You got old downtown, and then it's it goes clean to Opelika, right?
They've done they also have just a ton of space to work with. Everything that we have, they made twice as big because they could, and they also needed to.
And that's kind of what Clemson did, right? And Georgia Tech is forced to pick things like higher buildings, which I'm not, other than North Ave apartments, I'm not sure anything's taller than Tech Tower.
I mean, at this point. North Ave apartment,
maybe
in terms the library, the new library building.
Yeah, and Crossland,
I didn't know if Crossland was higher or if it was the same height.
But the point saying they either have to build up or they have to find other space. But for the most part, they pretty
much said we're got to build up. That was the general notion of what that presentation said, was that there's only so far out we can go. We want to be able to be more accessible to the various borders around campus, but in general, I don't think it's out of the question that in the next 25 years there's going to be a couple 20-story dorm buildings just to because you're going to have to do something.
I mean, a lot of state schools did that, but just in the 70s. If you go to UNC, there's some just monumentally tall, just wham, there's a
Yeah.
couple.
Or if
stories
they just decide
there.
one day it's like, all right, Smith, sorry, you're done, and then just call it a day on some of these
Would
buildings.
anyone
there would
cry?
be much rejoicing.
Maybe
Don't cry for me, Smith Gentina.
and happy was the land, but yeah.
Vida Akshay.
And specifically, they also had bridges that they were thinking about, like adding in those western parts to connect to Science Square and the other parts of campus that aren't touched on.
On that point, we've talked about the west side a number of times. The old Bankhead Avenue, so Hollowell Parkway used to be called Bankhead Avenue, and it used to go straight into basically what is now the Marietta Artery. And for a long time, the old bridge was just sitting over the tracks, abandoned. And I can confirm, because I drove past this last week, they're finally tearing that down. So step one of building a new safe for pedestrians and bikes and other things to cross these railroad tracks that isn't Northside Drive, which you don't want to do. Would not recommend doing that.
Please, Northside Drive is a pox upon our species.
But so they're taking down the Bankhead Avenue Bridge, and that would, roll straight out onto English Avenue, basically.
I have another point on that, but there was a design contest for that recently, right?
That was the bridge to Science Square.
Okay.
I think it is funded in the T-Splosh 2.0 thing, though.
Interesting. Something to keep in mind. But my point in mentioning some of these connection opportunities, right, is this is something that Tech did when it started the Tech Square plan. Is investing back in the community that it actually exists in, which is not really something that we saw it do for the vast majority of the back half of the 20th century.
It was actively tearing those down.
Well, yeah, urban renewal will kind of give you that.
Homes, they were like, now we have North Ave kind of
urban renewal will kind of give you that reputation.
Yeah. Who needs Lucky Street? Bam! Now we have a student center.
And they now have the opportunity to invest in these public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
And bring bring a level of density to these other communities, and especially with projects like the Community Gateway Center, you have
and the Marietta Street stuff too.
Right, you have opportunities to open up to other parts of Atlanta that you may not, you may have, let's say, disconcerted, to put it politely, in the near past. So I think these are all wins, right? These are all very, very good opportunities and very things that they should absolutely take advantage of. Just to wrap up with last couple of things. You mentioned the two plans, right? Oh my God, our Slack is going off. We talked a little bit about the two plans a little bit ago. The lighter footprint, like you mentioned, does not have the soccer stadium plan. It doesn't have a couple of the other nice things like residential infill. It doesn't have new housing, but it has green space. It has bridges. It has the key point of restoring Peter's parking deck to an actual park. Making sure that the 3rd Street tunnel is actually usable, right? So there's a lot of opportunities here for connection. Again, they have your footprint we've talked about a little bit, that has the athletic facilities, that has the bridges, that has new housing, along with investing in the CAP project, which we mentioned earlier but haven't really talked about today. So there are. It'll obviously remain to be seen which of these plans Tech ends up going with, right? But there's a lot of opportunity for growth. I have a strong
opinion on this. If you're gonna build, get your money's worth. Build, baby, build. Why do the
always be building? Yeah.
ABB. Always be constructing. Dang it! It was right in front of us.
Damn. But I think, aside from the fact of our personal master plan of building a soccer stadium on the connector cap.
Oh, I forgot to mention. They basically said that they talked about the cap in the idea of it's only going to be a half cap.
Yeah.
I think
our old idea of putting the grandstands in the O'Keefe parking lot and having the whole stadium take the breadth of 85-75 south and north, not happening now.
I thought they reduced the plan down to 10th to north already.
10th to north was the original secondary plan, because way back in the day they wanted to go like 17.
Yeah, they wanted to go like 14.
Long way.
Yeah.
And then they realized that it's all below grade.
Yes.
Yeah. It was a very dumb plan.
Anyways, I say build, baby, build, and that's kind of where I leave it. I don't think there was too much from the Q&A that I really got.
There wasn't much in the one that they posted that was big to know. But, just that, like, they know they got to build stuff. tech's going to grow probably faster than they want. So we're going to be fighting the battle of we need this thing, we need this thing. Like we know it's coming. It's just a matter of it actually happening. And
Yes, but
things.
you know what? I'm going to enjoy the students complain on whatever future Reddit replacement there is. They're going to continually complain about campus services and not know that any of this exists. But now they have an opportunity to listen to this and learn. And I think that's about where we should leave it. Mr. Grant, what say you in terms of wrap up?
I say we wrap it up. I don't have my laptop with me tonight, so we do not have a historic results pit of the week. I am working on a Jeopardy type thing, so TBD there. That might be fun. We'll see how that works out. But in the meantime, you can find us here in probably 2 weeks. We'll record next. You can find us in the meantime at fromtherumbleseat.com. You can email us your questions, comments, concerns, topic suggestions at fromtherumbleseat@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at FTRSblog. I'm at JakeGrant98. Jack is at Jack Nicholas. As always, you can find Section 103 on Twitter too. They're at Section 103. Check out their clearance. Check out potential new stuff as well. Section103.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. I always forget about YouTube at From the Rumble Seat, and podcast wherever fine podcasts are sold. Please rate, review, tell your friends. We really do appreciate it. It's been a great year, and we hope to continue along with y'all into another great academic and athletic year coming up here in July. And as always, good night, good luck, and go